Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is a special Middle East edition of City Talk. Quagmire and a constitution in Iraq, oil prices skyrocketing, and the Saudis sitting on an ocean of oil, Israeli settlers removed, prospects for peace in Palestine improved, Syria in U.S. crosshairs, Iran with the A-bomb, the Middle East, the cradle of civilization or coffin for the world. To talk about the Middle East, Israel and the Palestinians, Iraq, Iran, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and U.S. policy in the region is a distinguished Middle East hand. Richard Murphy, former U.S. ambassador to Mauritania, Syria, the Philippines, and Saudi Arabia. Ambassador Murphy served as Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs during the Reagan years, specializing in Arab-Israeli relations. He's been named U.S. Career Ambassador, and currently he is widely consulted expert and frequent commentator on Middle East and international affairs. Sir, it is always a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you.
Always
Good to
a
be
pleasure.
here.
The last time we spoke was in May of 2005, before that in December of the previous year. In that last conversation, we talked about the cover of Foreign Affairs. We asked, is there an Arab Spring? Is it autumn of the autocrats? And Gaza moving forward or pulling back? Let's start with the last question. You just came back from a trip that included Israel, the West Bank, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. Let's start with the Arab-Israeli Israeli situation. What's going on the ground right now? Well,
the Israeli settlers out of Gaza.
Relatively peacefully.
Relatively peacefully. In fact, I think surprisingly so to even some of the Israeli leadership, the military and civil leadership there. They're out, but that doesn't solve the problem, because even the problem of Gaza, because the Israelis continue, as the Palestinians will point out to you, to govern Gaza in the air, on the sea, and even on the land. And right now, the representative of what's called the quartet, that's James Wolfenson, has been trying, he was there last week when I was out there, trying to work out a formula to open Gaza to Egypt, because right now, at least until these last days, Gaza has been locked in on itself. And that's no solution. They've got to find a way to import, to export, to start to become a normal piece of territory.
Prospects for that happening in terms of infrastructure development. In fact, you went with a specific project in mind. Talk to us about your on-the-ground activities in the area.
Well, I didn't get to Gaza. Nobody was traveling in Gaza these last couple of weeks. I was in the West Bank. And the project was to explore with one of the UN agencies, the UNRWA, which has worked over the years, many years, to support the well-being of the Palestinian refugees. Budget is always as tight, so this was is an effort to see if we could raise some money privately in the private sector in this country, as is being done in some European countries, to support the budget efforts in health and education.
So infrastructure and social infrastructure.
Social infrastructure particularly, yeah. And we're just getting that organized as we speak.
Talk about the larger political activities going on between the Israelis and the Palestinians, the U.S., Egypt, and other regional and non-regional actors. What's the story and what are the prospects?
Well, they've just postponed, unfortunately, once again the meeting between the top Palestinian, Abu Mazen, and the Israeli Prime Minister, Arik Sharon. That will take place now, supposedly the end of October, after Abu Mazen has been to Washington, talked to President Bush. And I think that's scheduled for October 20. So direct talks, at least at the senior level, are frozen. And each one is complaining about the other. Sharon is saying he doesn't have a negotiating partner because the Palestinians aren't moving to stop violence, stop terrorism. And Abu Mazen is saying, look, my police force was destroyed during the last years of the Intifada. Israel not only targeted the terrorists, but targeted my police force. I have to rebuild, and Israel can help me become stronger by doing some things like, will be a very popular move to release some of the prisoners in Israeli jails and to stop building that barrier on the West Bank.
Talk about that wall.
That obsesses the Palestinians at the moment, and we've seen programs in the States showing just how that line is being built, how the wall is being built, and where it diverges from the line that was called the Green Line, the Armistice Line of 1948. It could take away from the negotiating table upwards of 10% more of the West Bank by the way it's built. If you add to that the future status of the Jordan Valley down between the Jordan River and the highlands where Jerusalem, Nablus, and the other centers of population are. And this has got the Palestinians all worked up again, that it's another land grab, not just a question of Israeli security, but of Israeli appetite for more land.
And the Israelis' response to that and the world reaction to this? The Israeli, and American policy reaction.
The Israeli response is, look, all we want is to control the violence against Israelis, be they civilians, be they settlers, regular citizens of Israel, or the military. Let's find a way to stop the violence. Now, the violence is down. Will it stay down? I don't know. And did it stop or slow down because of the wall? You can't say that's the only reason, because the wall isn't finished yet, and you can go around it in many parts.
Prospects. You're an old hand. You've seen this. I know it's difficult to look forward. You've got a Palestinian election in 2006. What could happen in 6 months to a year? What are some possible roads that might be taken or not taken?
Well, they just finished a round of municipal elections on the West Bank, and contrary to some of the pessimists, the Hamas organization didn't do that well. They got around 26% of the vote. Now, that doesn't tell you the whole story because they didn't contest in many areas. The Fatah candidates, the candidates of the Palestinian Authority, were uncontested in many voting centers, many constituencies. So how popular is Hamas? It's still an open question. They claim that elections were rigged and they were cheated. You know, that's as American as apple pie.
Absolutely. Sure. Go to the Bronx. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
Okay. But they are now focused on the legislative elections, National Assembly elections, which are supposed to take place in January. Those were delayed from, I think, October to January. If they take place, that'll be or whenever they take place, that'll be a major sign of how much authority and popularity Abu Mazen has been able to get into his hands. Does negotiating work, or is violence the answer? The answer up to now has been very much a split vote. If you believe in Hamas, the Israelis only understand violence, we should continue the fighting. If you believe in Abu Mazen, violence is not the answer. Let's sit down at the table and work our problems out.
Are you sanguine in any way, and what gives you hope?
There's a lot of bitterness on both sides, a lot of suspicion on both sides. I'm always hopeful, but it's been taking a long time, and I don't see the end in sight.
What is U.S. foreign policy toward the region now? Not the region, this particular conflict, and what ought it be?
Well, I think Washington has, unlike the first administration, the first Bush term, has agreed with the region and with the Europeans that this is a problem that has got to be worked on and be seen to be being worked on by the American government. We stood back that first term. Now, Secretary Rice, the president himself, has been much more engaged, and that's a plus. It doesn't mean it's going to guarantee the results, but the absence of the Americans is almost a guarantee of failure. So that gives me some encouragement that we're moving back onto the stage.
What do we bring to the game, if you will?
A stated policy, and the first time that any American president has said that, and this was a speech that the president made about 2 years back, that there should be a Palestinian state. There should be a two-state solution. And Sharon has followed on and seemed to accept that there should be a second state. The question is, what kind of state? Is it going to be viable? Is it workable? Can it survive? Washington has said it has to be territorial territories that are contiguous. That's not just a series of spots on the map of Bantustans that we saw under South Africa.
Right.
And Sharon, according to some views out there that I was hearing last week, will give contiguity, but it'll be connecting isolated areas by tunnels or by bridges. So there'll be transportation contiguity and not real
geographic.
Not geographic. And I'll tell you what, Doug, is one of the constant preoccupations of the Palestinians are these roadblocks, all done in the name of security. Some may have outlived their usefulness, maybe cut back, but these Israeli roadblocks where Palestinians of all ages, of both sexes, are challenged as the enemy, and it seems often whimsically by the young Israeli soldier on duty, I don't like your looks, you go back, go back. And
now, how much of this is, I mean, the old reality versus perception? This is real. You were there. What was your experience of what was going on?
Well, I wasn't harassed. I wasn't held up. We were stopped and questioned. I was in a vehicle which had the big UN sign painted on the side. UN isn't that popular with the Israelis, as you know, and regarded with some suspicion by the various guards. Okay. But there's a big range of reactions. Some of the soldiers would be, simply asking, where are you going and when are you coming back, and let's see your identification. It was very cut and dried. Others would say, you got no right to go there, or you can go into Nablus but no right to come out. I mean, which was simple. Right.
So this is a flashpoint. This is a sore point, but clearly from I can understand it from the Palestinian perspective, that this dislocation, but at the same time from the Israeli perspective, given their being victims of violence, what means do you use? I mean, the wall works and doesn't work, this works and doesn't work. Where's the give? Where's the potential give that doesn't endanger security?
Well, I think if you step back and, as I say, look at the wall today, it is not one solid barrier.
Right.
So the fact that violence is down isn't thanks to the wall. It's that there has been a growing political conviction among the Palestinians that violence is self-defeating. It doesn't pay.
So this, in a sense, out of all we've talked about so far, is the most giving of optimism, and that is that recognition of the ineffectiveness of violence. But you're saying these municipal elections are going to be really crucial as the signal, the legislative rather.
Yeah. Right. They will be, and that's why I think Sharon has got to look very closely at what they can do as Israelis to give a hand to the forces that say, let's talk. Because those forces are under threat from elsewhere in the Palestinian community.
How would the Israelis do that? Or how would a third party or third parties do that?
A very searching review of the value of the roadblocks. There were some 400 checkpoints in that very small area of the West Bank. Are all 400 necessary? Have a look at it. See if you can improve communication movement on the Palestinian-Arab side of the line.
Okay.
Prisoner release. Agreeing that the police force has to be rebuilt. To rebuild a police force, you've got to have, among other things, some light arms, some weapons. And there's been reluctance to see that because they say those weapons were used against them by police that went bad.
Right. Okay. So we are with our hands in the air and our fingers crossed.
Yeah, but there's a new couple of actors on the scene. Wolfenson, former head of the World Bank, trying to coordinate all the foreign aid organizations who don't work together all that well. It's not a question, not a problem of money. Money has always been available in that part of the world, be it for Israel or for the Palestinians. But to focus it on what can create jobs quickly, I don't know that you can have a massive work project like a PWA that could be seen on the ground between today, mid-October, and the time of the elections. But a start can be made. There have been some foundation stones laid for building projects. For instance, there's a major project funded out of one of the Arab Gulf states to build a new city in Gaza. They've just put the foundation stone for that. They've had a publicity. Maybe that appreciation
So jobs,
will spread.
employment, social connections,
Absolutely
social and
essential.
physical infrastructure.
All three are essential.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move to Iraq. In May, we were talking about quagmire, and we were talking about parallels to Vietnam and Iraq in terms of us getting in and getting out. There are two big issues confronting Iraq right now, it seems to me. The Constitution vote, which happens on October 15th, and how do we disengage? Those are the two major questions. Looking at this Constitution, the Times on October 9th, that the headline reads, Constitution or Divorce Agreement. And the thrust of the article says that essentially that you've got these centrifugal forces, and these centrifugal forces are almost undeniable, and that the Constitution is sort of a ratification of that. And then we saw the Saudi foreign minister talk about the disintegration of Iraq, and in a way that to an American was really eye-opening, that he saw it flying apart and leading to civil war. You're close to the Saudis and close to an understanding of what's going on. What is going on? What are the prospects here?
Well, I think that article, which was a good review of discussions about the Constitution, makes the one basic point. Don't put all your faith in a piece of paper.
Right.
One of the finest constitutions of modern days was that of the Soviet Union. Everybody says what wonderful words, but it meant nothing except a nice piece of words on paper. Is there a
peculiar American attitude toward written constitutions that let us see it as defining reality rather than it being defined by reality?
Well, I think that's one way to look at it. I think the defining American role has been one of great hurry and pressure on all of those factions to come together, to squeeze them, to try to build some sense of momentum that they will have, as they had last January, the first vote, in October to have a referendum on the Constitution. We'll see how that goes. We can talk about that. And then in January to have a vote for a government elected on the basis of that Constitution. We're in a hurry. And we've been in a hurry ever for the last 2 years trying to get these milestones agreed upon. And it's possible we're pushing things at a pace beyond where we should be. What's happened is that several decades of Sunni Arab rule, the minority in that region we used to call Mesopotamia, then Iraq, has been governing for several decades. And we have said, hey, one man, one vote, it goes to the majority, those are the Shia. So what are you objecting to? That's democracy. Well, that's exactly what they're objecting to. They were number one, and we're saying, hey, accept it, you're number two or number three, because there's the Kurds along with you.
And then the Sunnis are the basis of this insurgency.
Well, they are, because remember, we, in the early days right after the war, we said the army is dissolved and nobody who had served in the Ba'ath Party, which would both institutions dominated at the top by Sunnis, none of those people will be allowed to serve in any future government. So we sent a lot of young men, hundreds of thousands of young men, home without pay but with arms. And they've been the bedrock suppliers, if you will, of some of the insurgents. And we sent home those who had had the talent enough to be recognized by the former regime to play a role in administration. They weren't all loyalists to Saddam Hussein. You had to be in the Ba'ath Party to move up as a teacher, as a scientist, anything in public.
Let's talk about the upcoming vote. What is the significance of the vote, and what are the likely outcomes of the vote? And coming out of the vote, what happens to the politics?
Well, if on October 15, the Sunnis massively boycott the election, that would discredit the vote, and it would allow the Sunnis to say, well, yeah, we pulled out, but we told you so. Those Shia and Kurds are takeover artists. They plotted this all along. They presented us with a deal which was take it or leave it, and we said we will leave it. Mm-hmm. I hope that's not going to happen, but I think it's provided that if a majority in three provinces, any three provinces, say they're against the Constitution, then it doesn't come into effect.
Okay, let's just say that happens.
You go back to the drawing board, and you have to.
Well, it's more than the drawing board and the killing fields.
And the killing field, yeah.
For us and them, us meaning the United States, and them meaning all the Iraqis.
Right. But a successful vote that supports the Constitution won't end the killing either.
Go ahead.
You've got interests that have been forced out of power, out of influence, who are able to draw on the fervor, particularly of young guys coming in from outside the country who are ready to commit suicide in the name of defending their faith, to defending their identity, both of which those Americans are trying to take away from them. And it's been a powerful and effective message for some of the young recruits coming from all over the Arab world and some from beyond the Arab world into Iraq.
Okay, now we're talking about the people coming into Iraq. A headline in the Wall Street Journal of Friday, October 7th, the headline is, "Radicals in Iraq begin exporting violence, Mideast neighbors say." Isn't this an example of the law of perverse consequences? We went into Iraq to fight the war on terror, and in fact we're creating terrorists, and they're exporting terror to the region and perhaps outside of it?
If they do export it, and they've got every reason to do so, because the guys in charge have this vision of a militant Islam that will take over from what they call Western puppets, corrupt leaderships throughout the Arab world, and they will then create a new and purer form of Islam worldwide, starting, of course, with the Islamic world. It's certainly possible that some of these recruits will have picked up training in Iraq, which they will take back home with them. If they survive, they will go home and they will be hardened, and even more important, they will be skilled in explosives, in these improvised explosive devices that have been killing our people and killing Iraqis so effectively in the streets of Iraq. So, yeah, the unintended consequence is that when we went in to stop it, we may have lanced a boil which now is going to spread its poison back home.
U.S. casualties in Iraq are at 2,000. Recently, former President Clinton described Iraq as a quagmire, and you pointed out to me an interview with General Casey, head of military forces in Iraq, and I just want to quote this. The last item in this piece reads, asked if he worries that the U.S. troops who have died in Iraq, a number approaching 2,000, may have given their lives in vain, Casey said, quote, "No, I don't worry about that. Not yet. We're not there yet." Does that mean we're going to get there? I mean, is General Casey saying the road is one where Kerry's question, how many more people have to die in a worthless cause, is still answered by more? Is that what he's saying? Yes. Am I reading this correctly?
Yes. The way I read it is he's saying it's possible. It is possible we will get to that point where we will have to say they are dying in vain. But he's saying we're not there yet.
Does that mean we're never going to be there, or we're on the road to be there? I mean, this is a question of, mind reading here. But the two interpretations lead me to, one gives me goosebumps and the other doesn't quite yet. And that is not yet meaning never, or not yet we're on the way, but it's not now.
It's not now, but personally I interpreted his words as meaning we're on the way. It's possible.
What does the United States do? Do we withdraw? Do we withdraw at a date certain? First of all, what's the mission, and then how do we accomplish that?
Well, we set the mission, which was establish or put the country on the road to democracy.
After the mission was finding the weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, we changed missions when one proved
Didn't
to
work.
be
Right.
not working. Right. Well, what we didn't see, it takes a long time to get to a democracy, and there is no past history of democracy which would automatically flourish once the tyrant Saddam Hussein had been removed. Now, I don't think we're going to set a date certain. At one point I thought that would have been a good idea, but it's not administration policy, and I don't think that's going to happen. What I predict is going to happen is that the combination of uneasiness in the Army and the military generally about the state of our reserve units and the strain they're under, plus the basic political fact that in November 2006 there will be a congressional election. Put those two together, I suspect that we will be hearing before another year has passed, that substantial numbers are going to be withdrawn because we're succeeding.
Declare victory and go home.
Close
It
to it.
sounds like Vietnam. Okay, this closes part one of our conversation with Ambassador Richard Murphy. Next week, we will continue talking about the Middle East. We'll be talking about Iraq. We'll be going to other places that you visited, Saudi Arabia. We'll talk about Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. So, folks, tune in. See you shortly.